Okay, hi everybody. My name is Hank Lynch. I had the privilege to be the CEO for Restaurant Association. I think I've met some of you, but I may not have met all of you. Tonight, let me just tell you what our agenda is going to be. We're going to tell you what's going on with the Lake Thoreau Pool. I'm just going to introduce the subject, then we have staff experts who are going to talk about it. But before we get started, let me just first say that I'm very pleased to see there's some board members here. And if you guys could, board members, if you guys could stand up, starting with Kathy, introduce yourselves to the group.
I'm already standing. I'm Julie Vincent. All my friends and neighbors here. I'm Karen Anton. I'm the director from Hunters Woods Dogwood.
Hi, I'm John Moody. I'm secretary and representative from North Point.
I'm Doug Britt, at-large director.
I'm Tom O'Farron at large, and the Thoreau Pool is my pool as well.
Okay, we also have some staff here with us tonight. Larry, could you stand up? And Chris, and so you all know who we are?
Christian Baker.
And there's Willa.
Hi. So let's do it. Oh, we did. Okay.
Jay Wheeler.
I'm Laura Kowalski. Hopefully you've all gotten my emails, and if you haven't, come see me at the end of the meeting.
So I think you guys probably know hopefully you know what all these guys do. We got Parks and Rec, we got swimming pools, we got operations and other things, and we got the guy who's going to tell us all the details of what's wrong with the pool when it comes to Chris. So the other thing I'd ask you to do is we will have a question and answer session. We try to put this together in order to address most of your questions. So if you wouldn't mind, let us get through the presentation, take some notes, and then ask us the questions afterwards. Hopefully we have addressed a lot of them. The other thing is, if you didn't pick up one of these, it's out on the front counter there on the little rolling table. This has the address, the web address, and you go to follow all that's going on with the Lake Thoreau Pool. So if you don't have this, please pick it up before you leave. So what I'm going to do is just give you the introduction of what's going on with the pool. In the short of it, basically, this is your pool. What's the issue has to do with the retaining wall along the lake side and the lap side of the pool. Chris is going to go and explain what is actually wrong with it, what needs to be done with it, and why it has to be done now. What's also going to happen, we're going to tell you, is that the board has been informed completely about this, and they've authorized us to spend about $350,000 on the project in 2020. And Larry will go in and tell you what's involved with the project, why, and the reason it costs $350,000, why we've set that aside, because we know basically what it would cost to replace this pool. And we always put together about 25% to do the planning and the architectural, the engineering, the DRB review, the permitting, all of that sort of stuff. So that's why it's $350,000 set aside in 2020. And that's a little kind of information to tell you if we're doing that in 2020, it's going to take us about a year to do all the planning. And Larry will go and explain all of that. Some of you are aware of this. This pool is roughly 40 years old. Last year, you had a crack in the lap pool side, the lakeside side of the wall, which was repaired with staples. I don't know if any of you have seen that. That is a temporary fix. And Chris will go on to explain why you had that crack and why that wall is involved with it and why that wall needs to be replaced and the pool's no longer safe for you to use. This is what it looks like after it was repaired. All of you who've swum in the lap have seen this. And if you thought it was a permanent repair, it never was. It was a temporary repair. This shot was taken just last week, and you still can see where the repair was made. These circles are showing new cracks in the pool. So the basic questions, why $350,000? Because, as I just told you, it's 25% of what we believe will ultimately cost to replace the pool, and that money is always used for things like planning, community engagement planning. I say community engagement because Larry will go through the process to explain to you how we have done 4 other pools. Community is very involved. It involves the design, engineering, DRB review, and possibly permitting. Why can't the wall just be replaced? If you have walked behind that wall, you will see that in some places, it's within 10 feet of the lake. It's incredibly soft soil. Additionally, just replacing the wall is not a solution when the wall's 40 years old, and what's behind the wall and what's on the decking that's being supported by the wall is not safe. So you just can't simply take the wall out and replace it. You have to take out a significant portion of the pool. Chris will, this pool decking, and Chris will explain that. Why can't the pool stay open during 2020 for the planning, design, and engineering process? We've had an engineering study and it's convinced us it is not safe. So as a management decision, we're not going to allow you to use the pool because we don't believe it's safe. How long will the project take? Larry will tell you this, if it go through all the steps that's involved with it. As I shared with you, we've done 4 of these in the past. It will go probably the same way. We believe if it stays on track, the pool will be open in the spring of 2022. The next question, how will RA accommodate our community during the pool's downtime? Laura is here, and she will explain how we will do that using other pools and changing hours and that sort of thing. So these are the basic questions I think you were going to ask. Chris and Larry will address some of the more questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Chris right now, and he's going to explain to you what is indeed the challenge. Thanks.
Hello? All right, I just want to give you guys a quick overview of the history of Lake Thoreau Pool if you're not familiar with it. So it was originally constructed in 1979 by the Reston Land Corporation, and then in 1980, we submitted a revised plan. So the original design did not actually include a spa. That was kind of an afterthought from the original construction. So in 81, they completed the installation of the spa, which is this design right here, right in this little corner. So you can see this is an image right around the time it was opened initially, and there's no spa right here, there's no pump house, and this is the retaining wall in question. This is the same retaining wall that was installed, and it is there now. Quite a bit different than it is now. Can't even see it from this angle anymore. So just kind of give you an idea of how a retaining wall is designed. Some of you might not be familiar with this. So a basic timber retaining wall is constructed by using these wooden timbers with what's called dead men. Dead men act effectively like a ground anchor. So this portion or this beam is connected here with basically railroad spikes about yay long. And this T off the end acts as the anchor that's underground. So this is all under the soil. In modern designs, you actually have a drain line that runs along the bottom edge of it, which helps relieve any hydrostatic pressure. The design that they used back in 81 did not include that. All they did was they punctured 1-inch holes about every 4 feet on center along that bottom row. And that's what facilitates the drainage out of it. It's not very effective, but it was kind of how they did it back then. So that image right there to the right is a picture from Lake Thoreau, and it's an image of one of the dead men's on the front. So if that picture gives you an indication at the surface of what it likely looks like underground. So it's that rotted out, which is this face right here, there's a good chance that that piece that supports the wall underground is in a similar condition. So let me just walk you through the whole structural assessment that was performed, and we kind of look at it from 2 different phases. There's the qualitative piece and the quantitative piece. So the qualitative piece is the original piece back in 2016 when RA staff do their annual inspections. We do this at every facility. We go through, look at for anything that might be necessary to repair out of just operations or capital. In 2016, we started noticing a few issues at the facility. The retaining wall was generally starting to kind of degrade at a bit of an accelerated rate. There were some cracks and heaving in sections of the pool decking and the coping. There were hairline cracks within the pool and the spa areas. There were hollow sounds in the deck, so when you walk around, you started tapping the deck, the concrete sounded like a drum, which kind of means that there might be voids underneath the concrete, which means it's not being supported underneath anymore. And we're also starting to have some difficulty maintaining water levels in the pool, which means that there's a leak. So in 2017, before opening, we tasked Dewberry to do a structural evaluation, a preliminary structural evaluation. So at this point, they're only making observational looks, looking at it. And they also did a record research, so they looked through all of their old plan sets and the other information you could get off of Fairfax County in terms of soil studies and soil composition. And they determined initially that their timber retaining walls that retain the fill along the Lower East Side of the site appeared to have some lateral movement. So they've noticed that there was some movement of the wall. The buried dead men are likely in very poor condition because of long-term contact with the soil, hence that dead men view of it being very rotted out. And replacement of the timber wall should be relatively in the near future, within 1 or 2 years. And this is back in 2017. Their final piece was that it is recommended that additional investigation be performed to include movement monitoring, crack or concrete core samples, and a soil study to confirm or refute this analysis. So that was phase one. In the interim, in 2018, during the pool, we started noticing the water level beginning to accelerate in terms of its leak. And so at the end of 18, we requested from the board an allocation to perform a structural repair on the pool before we opened in 2019. And that's what this image is here. So like Hank described, we performed a structural staple installation. So each one of these cutouts is one of those steel staples. And it basically just holds the crack together and stabilizes the shell to prevent any future movement and help stem the leak. But it's not a permanent fix. This is kind of a short term, and to do it properly, you actually need to go in, rip out that portion of the shell, reinforce any of the rebar underneath of it, and then reshoot the pool with new concrete. So phase two, this is when you get into the qualitative piece of the investigation. So in 2019, this year, we hired Kimley Horn as our on-call engineer to perform a follow-up investigation using the Dewberry's recommendations as the basis of their evaluation. So they took all the recommendations that they had suggested for follow-up, which included 10 concrete core samples and soil samples. They did compressive testing on all those core samples. They also installed 14 crack monitors, which is what you see right here. Those will go on and continue monitoring for the next 6 months to kind of see what kind of movement and what rate we're looking at in different areas. And so on the October 23rd, the final report was given to staff, immediately given to the board, and then presented to them at the 24th meeting. And that far sample right there is a core sample, and you can see the buildup of plaster over time. That's 40 years worth of white coats, about 2.5 inches. So the primary results of the study. So visual observations and geotechnical explorations of the site indicate that the eastern perimeter timber retaining walls adjacent to Lake Thoreau water surface have slightly rotated and creeped towards Lake Thoreau. So it's no longer just a general observation, it's a confirmed observation. The observed cracking in the pool and the deck slant sloping and displacements are general indications that the wall is moved and portions of the pool have moved with it as a result. And they also did a global stability analysis of three cross sections of that wall area. And so what one of these stability analyses do is they use all the data from the soil samples, the concrete samples, and any other data they have available to create what is known as a safety factor. And a safety factor is an engineering calculation of the ratio of the allowable stress to the actual stress in the structure. And so a safety factor of less than 1 represents a likely or active failure. Anything over than 1 represents how much stress is within the allowable limit. So 2 of the 3 cross sections are below what's a 1.5, which is considered Fairfax County minimum requirement for a safety factor on a retaining wall. One was actually at about a 1.1, I believe, which is very, very close to an actual failure point. So given all this data, investigators find as a professional opinion that the existing timber retaining wall be replaced or remediated at this time. So due to the findings, any updated timeline before an immediate replacement is not suggested because of liability concerns. An engineering firm cannot give you, I guarantee this wall for another year at this point because it puts all the onus on them if something should happen. So they can't give us a timeline. Out of abundance of caution, any portion of the facility at this stage that's open is a liability. So the whole facility needs to stay shut down until this is addressed. The replacement of the retaining wall should use a concrete footer that's going to be potentially 6 feet in depth and approximately just as wide. And a concrete wall suggests over timber, obviously because of its longevity, but is obviously far more expensive than a timber. The biggest problem is the access to the wall. If you've been back there and you've seen this wall, it's no more than a few feet from the edge of the lake. And so in order to get a retaining wall of this size out and a new one in, you're gonna have to bring in a lot of heavy equipment and a lot of machinery, and there's not a lot of room to operate back there. So as a result, large portions of that whole eastern side would have to be taken out to get the machinery back there to even do the job. So you're talking about major disruption to the spa area, the grass beach area, and anything else that's facilitated around it. The parking lot's probably gonna have a lot of damage. There's all that machinery moving around. So to do that is not gonna be really sensible from just doing a standard repair. We're better off doing a full facility renovation at that stage, because we'll have less service disruption, better economies of scale. There won't be multiple deployments, bringing contractors back in to do one job and then back a few more years later to do another job. Collateral damage, there's a risk if you replace that one section, they come back later to do another, that they just damage what they just did. So that's why we're recommending that the 39-year-old facility undergoes a full replacement rather than just a simple repair of the wall. I'll hand this over to Larry.
Thank you, Chris. Again, I'm Larry Butler, RA staff. I want to give a little deeper history. So how many people have been here for 30-plus years in Reston? Excellent. Some of you remember these projects then, I suspect. But I think it tells a good story about what Chris has just told you about what our plan is for Lake Thoreau Pool. So I'm going to just briefly review the last 4 pool renovation projects that we have done, though only 4 major ones. The very first one was Uplands Pool, which was done in 1999. And what you'll see on the left on each of these slides is the prior pool, and then on the right is the renovation. So this pool was 29 years old when it was renovated. And based upon the same kind of, we didn't do the structural analysis that we've done on Lake Thoreau, but based on the same review and observations of the decking, the structure, and so forth, the decisions were made by prior boards to go in and totally renovate these pools. And you'll notice that it looks a little bit different in each one of these cases. And I'm not going to go into the details. Hopefully, many of you have been to these pools and visited them. And if you didn't know the prior pool, most of them were standard 25-meter pools with a wading pool. So the images on the right of these is what they have become. So this is Uplands Pool, the very first one. And you'll notice there we got a little splash area. It's a very popular pool. Hunters Woods Pool, opened in 1967. This was redone in 2002 when the pool was the ripe age of 35 years old. And you can see here the new configuration on the right. We've done some really interesting things there. The other important note to make on all these is we made these pools accessible. So in each of these renovations, we made them to the ADA code at the time, and with the county code, we made them fully accessible. And, you know, in a lot of cases, we had to do a lot of work on the pool shell in particular, and we had to renovate and do, you know, articulations in the bathhouses and so forth. Because some of these bathhouses are concrete block. It's a little more difficult than just using or working with a timber structure or frame structure. And then, of course, Glade Pool. Now, one of our coolest features with the 21-foot slide tower, something like that. So again, a dramatic difference there. Also, it got the hot tub at the back, or the spa there. And again, this one was done at the ripe age of 33 years. And then our most recent one is Dogwood Pool, which is not too far from this office. And that one, we actually put in an outdoor fountain and a pavilion so that it's accessible for those people who choose not to get pool passes or whatever. But this has been a really popular facility as well. And again, that one was done at 32 years of age. Lake Thoreau, 39 years old. It is our opinion that this one is way overdue for a major overhaul. And so that's what I want to talk to you about now, is what does that process look like? And that sketch on the right has nothing to do with Lake Thoreau Pool. That is straight from the internet. So this is a typical project life cycle that we have, and this is something the Capital Department has worked on over the last 2 or 3 years. And the key piece here, and these are for our large projects. This is not just replacing a section of deck. This is a major facility replacement schedule. So we're here in 2019. The board has already authorized a $350,000 to get started on this project. These key decision points are points along the timeline where the board, has to make a decision. You don't want to go through an entire planning process and then get to a point and say, well, now we have to fund it or now we don't. So we've built into this, and I'm going to talk really about this on the next slide. This is the key piece where you all are involved. We want some milestones where we can kind of do a gut check. And so we built that into the process. But as Hank said in his opening remarks, these projects take a long time. Has anybody here tried to get house renovation approved through Fairfax County? How long it takes to get the building permits and so forth? It's not real easy. It takes a long time. This particular project, if we do the pool, considering the ADA improvements, there's a lot of grade that has to be contended with, the plumbing, electrical. Chris didn't mention this, but there is I think an 8 or 10-inch sanitary sewer line that runs right behind that wall, parallel to the lake. And that's in an easement in favor of the county. So it's not like we can go in and work on top of their sewer line. So there's lots of restrictions. There's also a power line back there as well. So there's a lot of things to contend with. And those things take time. And so, again, this is just kind of a high-level review of the process that we undertake to go through one of these projects. But I know what you're really interested in is how are you going to have an impact on that? So let me get to that. So this is the first major piece of one of these projects, and we call this really the planning and scoping. And what we're proposing is, number one, we need to do a very deep dive into the existing conditions. Utilities, topography, vegetation, sun shade studies, the parking. I mean, it's very limited parking, but it's a very small site. And we don't have the ability to add more parking there, or very little. Maybe it can be done a little more efficiently, but in a renovation, we want to make it accessible. And right now, there's no way that parking lot would meet accessibility standards. So that's something that we're going to be held to, and we want to do that anyways. We think it makes perfect sense. We've done that with all of our other renovations. So we would actually utilize a consultant to do this. This is an engineering study. The other thing that I'll mention about that wall and most of the facility, it's in a Chesapeake Bay Resource Protection Area, which wasn't even in place until 1993. So in 1980, when the pool was built, nobody had even heard of the Chesapeake Bay RPA. So there's all kinds of evaluation, site evaluation has to occur first. And that's going to take about 1 to 2 months. The second part, and this is where the fun begins. Once we know what's on site and what those kind of restrictions are, what we have to work around in any kind of renovation, whether it's just for the wall or for the entire pool, then we get into this. And what we're proposing here is to hold at least 2 community design charrettes, where we get whomever wants to come, get them into a room, and let's talk about ideas. And it may come back to say, we want the pool exactly the way it is, except that we got to make it accessible, so that's likely going to change some things. And we got to watch out for the utilities, and that might change some things. Oh, and we also have some private storm drainage that run under the pool deck. So if you've seen those grates kind of near the front door, that's a private storm sewer system that the developer built as part of the pool development that we're responsible for. So we've got to contend with that too. So this is probably a 2 to 3 month process right here. But that's a really interactive process where you all get to participate, toss out your ideas, talk about those ideas with your neighbors, talk to the consultants, talk to us, and ultimately we'll come out with some ideas that then we can plot onto the site and say, okay, what works and what doesn't work. And it's a vetting process. And these are all, open discussions. This is not done in some closed room. And this is really synthesizing what those uses are with the existing conditions and coming up with some initial concepts. In other words, what could work here? And it may be that what's there right now could work just fine. But there might be some other cool things that could be done that might be incorporated as well. And so we see that taking about 1 to 2 months as well. So right now, if we get started January 1st, the board approves the funding officially. when they set the budget, the assessment rate on November 21st. That's our hope. We get started January 1st. We get this part going, and then hopefully this in late winter, early spring, when we're not really thinking about swimming anyways, because there may be snow on the ground, at least I hope there would be, then, we can do all that fun stuff inside. So we're talking about taking that into late summer to begin with. And then, if the board authorizes that, with the money they've got, and I'm making an assumption here, we've got a lot of board members here, they would have to approve the funding for the full project, which will take into 2021. And a project like this, particularly if you have to tear up the whole basin, that, for those of you who have seen it, if you saw it at Glade or the other pools, it is a major construction project. So the important thing to note here is we got to get through this step first to, see what's going to work, re-envision it, got the board to approve the funding, and then we've got to get going on construction plans, architecture, MEP, all those other fun things that go along with construction drawings. So that is kind of it in a nutshell, and what we're hoping to do is get started on this very early in 2020, and we look forward to everybody's participation. Now, as Hank said, we will keep everything up on the website. We'll put this presentation up there, and if you ever have questions, we're all here. You know who to contact. Shoot us questions. I know a lot of you have. Laura's got a great email list going already. Let me just jump back real quick. So that green slide is here, and the board will have a key decision point, along with the community. Is this the direction we want to go? Now that we've done all this background work, we know what the opportunities are, what the constraints are, and how are we going to move forward?